a question of not if, but when the Taliban continue to gain ground ahead of the final withdrawal of U.S.-led forces from Afghanistan, so much so that former military commanders predict the fall of Kabul within months. We'll ask about the latest fighting, the Afghan security forces who fled across the border into Tajikistan, and how an eventual return of the Taliban to the place they were before 2001 would change the lives of ordinary citizens. Ahead of a speech by Joe Biden on the drawdown that's included a surprise early departure from Bagram Air Base, we'll also gauge the mood among foreign powers. How much U.S. support can there be without boots on the ground? Will Turkey ensure, as promised, the security of Kabul airport? And what about neighbors closer to home? Pakistan, India, Iran, and also China. China, an ally of Pakistan with its Belt and Road Infrastructure Building Initiative. China worried that lawlessness will allow armed groups to mount attacks on its border in Xinjiang province, where the wholesale crackdown on Uyghur Muslims has spawned blowback. Could Beijing now tread where the Soviets and the Americans got bogged down? Today in the France 24 debate, we're wondering what is next for Afghanistan. Joining us, the Afghan ambassador to France, Mohammed Homayoun Azizi. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Also with us, Leila Jacinto, senior editor at France24.com. How are you?
Good.
From Kabul, human rights activist Wasma Frog, co-founder of the Women and Peace Studies organization in Afghanistan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And we also want to welcome Ali Yawar Adili, country director for the Afghanistan Analysts Network. Thanks for joining us. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, earlier, Afghan forces claiming to have retaken the capital of the northwestern province of Badghis. This is near the border with Turkmenistan. Since then, the government announcing the deployment of commandos, and the governor of Badghis province telling the French news agency AFP that the Taliban had resumed attacks from several directions with light and heavy weaponry. Valerie de Kim filed this report.
In the Afghan city of Kala Aina, the streets have emptied as the sound of gunfire grows louder. In recent days, Taliban forces have ramped up their assault on the provincial capital, threatening to take over. But according to the Afghan government, the insurgents are retreating.
او د بادغیس هم داسې کوم د تشویش وړ وضعیت نه ده د ښار کمربند کاملا مدافع جوړه ده په کومو ولسوالیو کې چې اړتیا وه.
The attack on Badghis province is the latest in the Taliban's recent offensive, which has intensified since U.S. and NATO forces began withdrawing from the country in May. In just over 2 months, the Taliban have managed to seize at least 150 districts out of around 400. And they have made rapid gains in strategic northern provinces along the border with Central Asian countries. At least 6 key districts in Badakhshan have fallen in the hands of armed insurgents, while in neighboring Kunduz, fighters continue to press ahead towards the provincial capital. They have also seized a key border crossing, thousands of troops fleeing into Tajikistan to escape the Taliban. This as Afghan forces are already stretched thin by fighting elsewhere in the country and will need to become less reliant on air cover provided by the U.S. It comes amid the quiet departure of U.S. forces from the Bagram Air Base, the U.S. Army being accused of abandoning the military complex without notifying their Afghan allies. The U.S. says it has completed 90% of its withdrawal from Afghanistan. In a bid to contain the Taliban's advance, Afghan militias have been deployed to help troops on the ground. Analysts say the government's strategy now consists of consolidating what forces remain around key cities. Many left wondering if the military will hold on for much longer without foreign assistance.
Ambassador, the Taliban's traditional heartland is in the south, but a lot of the images we just saw in that report are places in the north, the northwest, the northeast of Afghanistan. What's going on up there?
Thank you very much. You know that unfortunately the terror group and the terror network expanded their networks in all over the country. And now they have presence in the north, in the south, in every part of the country. And particularly on the north part of Afghanistan, there is an hotspot of terror elements that originate from the Central Asian countries.
So you're saying it's not those that are in that border area with Pakistan. These are different fighters.
All these groups related to their safe haven located in Pakistan, because in our region, the safe haven and the training center of all terrorist groups are located in Pakistan. And Pakistan, unfortunately, still didn't change the policy of support of extremist group in the region for their own interest purpose.
All right, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy, a Washington-based think tank, regularly updates. It has an interactive map that shows which districts are under Taliban control. We can perhaps call it up now. And as we look at that map, we see all the areas that are in dark gray there, Leila Jacinto, are controlled by the Taliban. Most of those are rural areas, and the disputed ones are the ones in red on that map. And what we're seeing is they're getting closer to the big cities.
They are, but they're encircling the big cities. I don't know. It seems like they are not pushing into the big cities because, remember, there is a peace negotiation process going on, but there's no peace deal as yet. They have not had talks, direct talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban. So I do not know what is, whether they plan to enter the cities, but for now it certainly seems that their modus operandi is to encircle the cities. We don't know how long that will be and how that will play out on the ground.
Wasma Frog, you've in the past done field work in Kunduz. Your thoughts on what's going on in the north?
Thank you. North has always been problematic with, I agree with the ambassador on the issue of having the Central Asian militants. There's a lot of foreign fighters. At some point, we had French Algerians fighting in Faryab, for example. At the same time, there's bigger number of militias that have been forming at that front. So there is a combination of the foreign fighters, the Taliban, who are actually anchoring these foreign fighters in the north. And at the same time, it's also, I think it has taken the ANDSF, our forces, with surprise as well, because there was this understanding that the Taliban have strongholds in the southeast, for example. So maybe those would be the areas where they would make a lot of progress. But what has actually, happened is that because in the north, the Taliban have been making a lot of progress. And because our forces do not have the right ammunitions, this transition has not happened. The American forces left at the time. The announcement was done by June, July. They all left. 18,000 contractors who were providing, artillery, radar, all the kind of support to Afghan forces. All of them are gone. So Afghan forces who live like in these small kind of checkposts, they don't have the ammunition. The air supply is not there. The fuel supply is not there. And then what can they do? That's why many of them have actually had to surrender to save their lives. So it has been a very, very flawed kind of a withdrawal, which did not have a transition.
But they had years, didn't they, to prepare for this transition? Whose fault is it?
Well, we haven't prepared yet. Look, if you look at the DoD reports, DoD is saying by 2023, the Afghan forces would have 83% of its ability to fix these Black Hawks. So right now, thousands of Humvees are left there, broken down. Nobody can actually repair them. Thousands of, for example, their, equipments. Same with the air power. All those Black Hawks, the birds, the little birds, all of those military, power airplanes that were given to Afghan forces, we are not able to fix them. So they are all being useless. So that the transition has not happened. Afghans are not prepared.
Ali Yawar Adili, what are you seeing when it comes to the north? And by the way, I'm haunted by something you wrote at the beginning of last month in a piece about how, for the first time in 20 years, quote, power brokers are speaking publicly about mobilizing armed men outside of the Afghan national security forces and government structures. Again, you wrote that at the beginning of June. Has that prophecy happened?
Thank you. There are a few points about the swift capture of northern districts by the Taliban. One is, of course, some of those districts were already somehow encircled by the Taliban, and only district centers were left to the government. And the second thing, the Taliban have also somehow been investing in some sort of human resources and manpower in the north, in the communities in the north. And of course, they have been recruiting and using those recruits in the north in the recent fight as well. And the third point is that the Taliban, in fact, since the U.S.-Taliban agreement on 29 February 2020, major political figures and factions from the north were talking about a second resistance, and they were talking in three phases. One was the signing of the agreement between the U.S. and the Taliban, and the second one after the announcement of unconditional withdrawal by Biden administration, and the third one was after the Taliban started their incursion into northern districts. And the Taliban really somehow, it looked that the Taliban tried to prevent such mobilization by these political factions and leaders who fought the Taliban is a part of the fast resistance, the so-called fast resistance in 1990s and early 2000.
So what you're in effect saying, Ali, what you're in effect saying, Ali, is that this is they don't want a repeat of before 2001, when the stiffest resistance to the Taliban came from that so-called Northern Alliance.
That is true. That there was the strongest, and even in some of the districts that now have fallen to the Taliban, even did not fall to the Taliban. For example, Balkhab district of Saripur never fell to the Taliban in 1990s, but now it is under pressure. And also the Resif Bala of Samangan was also like a center of resistance in 1990s, but now the Taliban have captured that district, and the focus seems to be to prevent a second resistance by this Northern Alliance and this strong men.
And so, Ali, Ali, let me ask you then. Ali, let me ask you, sitting today in Kabul, are you fatalistic? It's only a matter of time before the insurgency takes the capital?
What we see, the Taliban have not engaged or refused to engage seriously with the Afghan government for a political settlement, and of course they have somehow they have had the U.S. military and NATO forces out of the theater of Afghanistan. They have secured the release of more than 5,000 of their prisoners, and they have boosted their international recognition and legitimacy. And with all those factors into play, then of course it does look that the Taliban will continue their military, their push for a military takeover.
Jacinto?
What I suspect could be happening is that maybe the Taliban don't want the PR of going into Kabul. They may, when the peace negotiations seriously happen, they may come out with something which they call a peace agreement, which will not really be an agreement. It will be
But why should they
a zero-sum game.
Why should they negotiate seriously, Leela, when they have the momentum on the battlefield?
That's exactly what they think, and they didn't negotiate even with the U.S. military. I mean, it was hardly a negotiation. It was, in fact, a U.S. power handover to the Taliban. So no, you're absolutely right. They think that they have won this, and I suspect that they're going to present a peace deal to the Afghan government as a sort of a fait accompli. So I am not very hopeful about this peace process, and that could be the reason why they are not, they have not really advanced into Kabul as yet.
Mohammed Humayun Azizi, your thoughts on the Taliban's strategy, what we've just been talking about. First, remembering what happened before 2001, therefore striking in the north and taking their time before any offensive against the capital.
Yeah. So let's talk the root of what is the root cause of current situation in Afghanistan. It is certain that Afghanistan is going through a phase of transition, and there are huge of challenges. If we look at carefully, all this current problem refers to the agreement that was signed between United States and Taliban. The whole process of Doha Agreement was handled in such a way that gave the Taliban too many concessions. The unknown
and the government was placed with the fait accompli. It was the U.S. negotiating directly with the Taliban.
Yeah, it was not the negotiation between the Afghan government and Taliban. It was between the terrorist group and United States, which is strange. And the unknown part of this agreement and the annex and the release of over 5,000 of Taliban prisoners, and finally the way of drawdown of international troops took place, led to an emboldened Taliban. These are on another side.
All right, the way the drawdown is going, something that the Afghans have been very critical of in the past days. We're going to pick up on that point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at the situation in Afghanistan as the Taliban continue to gain ground. We're with Afghanistan's ambassador to France, Mohammed Humayun Azizi. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to Leela Jacinto, senior editor at France24.com. Wasma Frog, co-founder of the Women Peace Studies Organization in Afghanistan, is with us from Kabul, as is Ali Yawar Adili, country director for the Afghanistan Analysts Network. We were talking about it just before the break. Afghanistan security forces upset with Washington for the manner in which last week they left Bagram Air Base, saying that they were basically left in the dark, only knew that the U.S. withdrawal was complete when looters showed up in the morning. Correspondents Sonia Ghezali and Solène Chalvon-Fioriti went to Bagram and filed this report.
Behind these walls and barbed wire is Bagram military base, only an hour's drive from Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. About 3,000 Afghan soldiers have taken over the base after the departure of American troops. Said Ali Hussein is one of them.
Is everything okay?
Don't worry, nothing to report on any of the 4 entrances to the base.
We need the support of the people of the village, of the government. They must help us and provide us with resources. The Americans destroyed everything here.
Much of the equipment left behind by the American troops ended up in the scrapyards of the neighboring village. Abdul Wahid Nemati resells military boots from the camp.
I'll sell them for 500 to 1,000 Afghanis. It depends. It's a very good thing that they're gone. Our country will finally be able to experience peace. As soon as they left the base, everyone was relieved. We became calmer. The Americans didn't bring peace here.
But for the governor of Bagram, the American departure is rather a source of concern. The Afghan army struggles to contain the Taliban's advances. The group has taken control of more than 60 district centers since May 1st.
When they left Bagram, the Americans left thousands of unemployed people behind. It's going to cause security issues. They also took all the modern equipment with them. It's a big problem.
The American troops took a sophisticated air surveillance system with them when they left. Now, the new troops at Bagram military base will have to do without it.
Ambassador Humayun Azizi, what do you say when you hear in that report that shoe seller saying, now we'll have peace that the Americans have gone?
So the ultimate withdrawal of all foreign forces was and still is the demand of every Afghan, just as it is of every American and every European citizen. Nevertheless, the key here is how to approach to that strategic issues. Unfortunately, if we look at the publicity that went around the whole step of pull out, it was not a proper way to deal with current situation. And it has a negative impact on the morale of our soldiers. For instance, in recent weeks, our allies announced the security of Kabul airport, not the security of country, not a large city, only an airport. What kind of message does that send to our enemy and even to our soldiers?
If you're in Joe Biden's shoes, is there any other way you could have gone about it, Leela Jacinto?
Well, if I was in Joe Biden's shoes, do not forget that in the Obama administration, Joe Biden was the strongest voice against the surge. So when Joe Biden came into power, there was absolutely no question for those of us who were following Afghanistan that he wanted to pull out and pull out fast. I agree with the ambassador that nobody envisaged that the pullout is going to be so shambolic. What happened at Bagram, at the airbase, which is really the nerve center, the symbolic power of the U.S. troops, is going to be remembered in Afghan history, and it is a really it's a metaphor for the loss of U.S. status, prestige, because the U.S. leaves a void that other powers are going to try to fill, should the security situation merit that or enable that, and that is not in America's interest. So if I was in Biden's shoes, I would probably listen to Pentagon counselors who were saying, their presence in the U.S. was pretty minimal before the pullout. They could have just kept it at that level. And I absolutely agree that, there was the talking points of the pullout. This started in 2014. It was a small U.S. presence there that could have stayed on. But, when have we seen politicians do something that does not seem right for an election.
And in the meantime, Wasma Frog, we're now seeing an inflation of possible mediators. We talked in part one of our discussion about the U.S. Speaking with the Taliban in Doha. On Wednesday, we had a Taliban delegation in Tehran speaking with the Afghan government. And this Thursday, a Taliban delegation that went over to Moscow. There, Russia saying that this delegation said it would respect human rights. It assured them within the, even including those of women, within the framework, quote, of Islamic norms and Afghan traditions. Your thoughts on these Taliban delegations we're seeing everywhere?
This whole issue of human rights, I can only laugh at it. I and 200 of my colleagues throughout Afghanistan, we are tracking what's going on in every district that are currently under attack by the Taliban. So in Kunduz and Takhar, for example, they would, we have been documenting experiences of people in their own homes where they would, ambush people's home, throw the elders on the grounds, take people's food by force. And this girl that I, talked to yesterday, her 11-year-old brother was taken by the Taliban, and when they didn't have the rice and meat that they were asking for, and this girl was telling me that they were telling them that, this is an 11-year-old child. What can he do for you? He said, at least we can plant bomb in him and blow a checkpost. So what we see on the ground, has the Taliban have become unleashed, literally. These fighters on the ground have no responsibility, no accountability to whatsoever. They are burning people's homes. Yesterday in Badghis, for example, the way the wood seller market, including people, were all attacked. Right now, I'm hearing about Faro, for example, a private university was taken into hijacked for many hours like that. Kids and boys and girls were inside that. So all of this sounds ridiculous to me, that, this whole political settlement, because this is a group that has no political. So what the world has done to us, including the Americans, is that they have given the Taliban an identity that they do not have. This is not a political group. This is an insurgent terrorist group that actually just destroys, that continues to destroy our homes and our people. So all of that, the peace talks in Doha, these guys traveling all around because they get all that freedom. Why don't the U.S. administration sanction them? Just the way you're sanctioning the Iranian, regime or leaders or other, groups in other places in the world. Why the Taliban leaders are not being sanctioned?
I'll put it to you what I put to the ambassador, which is we saw in that report that shoe seller saying, oh, now that the U.S. is going, we'll have peace.
Oh, we can't base the whole conversation on this.
No, but we are hearing from a lot of people in Afghanistan saying that, when you look at Kabul, it's just infighting and corruption, and we've got to move on now.
Of course, yes, we have huge challenges. The forces are sitting in boxes in different parts of the country. When I look at the checkposts of the ANDSF, these are boxes in different districts, which are completely, surrounded, and they do not have access to roads, and their roads are all blocked. They don't have air power. So I think this blame is not just on Afghans. This blame has to be taken by the whole international community, who has failed to bring the Taliban to any political negotiation. The Taliban have nothing to gain from any politics at this point. They are just, killing Afghans on the ground, and anybody would not even say a word, because we are all trying to, my family, everybody's family, we are just saying whatever happens, we just try to save our lives, So what Afghans, if you do not hear Afghans, outcry at this point, it's a lot, because, people are just scared to save their own lives. So the politics of it now is there is no use of all these useless meetings in Moscow and Tehran. If the Taliban do not come to the power, to the table, where they see that there is a political, they should be pressured. But there's no pressure on them. No pressure militarily, no pressure politically. They are free. The UN just lifted, extended the sanctions. They are all just going freely all around.
All right, so you mentioned the international community. Let's talk about it. We have consensus on this panel that the U.S. is definitely leaving. And then there are other players. We talked about Moscow a minute ago. We talked about Iran. We talked about Pakistan and India. The Financial Times this week looking at the prospect of a stepped-up Chinese presence after the U.S. departure. Quoting an Indian government official as saying China's approach was to try to rebuild Afghanistan's shattered infrastructure in cooperation with the Taliban by channeling funds through Pakistan. For that, well, let's go to a map showing where China is working on a trade corridor for its Belt and Road Infrastructure Initiative that would go from its border to the Indian Ocean. And, of course, there is that tiny bit, if we look at the map, Leila Jacinto, there's that tiny bit of Afghanistan that does touch China.
Yes, China shares a border with Afghanistan, but when you're talking about the regional players, and we are seeing such a repeat of what has happened to Afghanistan in the past. All the regional players playing a sort of great game of chess. Now this is a new great game that's happening.
Because before 2001, China was never involved in any of this.
Absolutely. China in 2021 is not the China of 1989 or before 2001. So China has definitely changed. It's become expansionist. However, barring Pakistan, most of the regional countries, are dealing with the Taliban because it's a sort of a fait accompli. They would rather not have had to deal with the Taliban, but they are just going ahead and doing so because that's what they feel. That's the next power player in Afghanistan. With regards to the infrastructure, yes, there are all sorts of Chinese infrastructure initiatives to that part from that. They plan to extend a road from Kabul to the Pakistani city of Kandahar, which will join the BRI, the Silk Road Initiative. All this is contingent on the security situation. And when these talks happen, and I agree with Wagma, talks all over the place, 3+1+2, Islamabad talks, Doha talks, etc., they're all contingent on the security situation. So I am not really sure, and I don't think Beijing is very sure that these infrastructure plans can actually happen on the ground. Afghanistan, when the Taliban were in power before, there was talk about an oil pipeline, but all this sort of infrastructure needs security. And this is geek talk, really.
Ali Yawara Dili, forgive the geek talk, but can China succeed where, well, the Americans have failed, the Soviets have failed? I'm not going to go all the way back to the ancient Greeks, but can China manage to be this stabilizing foreign presence that others have not been?
Well, I think Afghanistan is still in unfolding new theater after the withdrawal of NATO and U.S. forces. So I would believe that China and any other countries should think twice before intervening in Afghanistan. And of course, any investment in Afghanistan would need to have two questions resolved in advance. One is whether the Taliban will really fight and deal with foreign militants in the theater of Afghanistan. And the second one is whether the Taliban will be filling the security gap and ungoverned spaces in Afghanistan. And
well, let me put it to you, Ali. Let me put it to you crudely. Can it be the kind of deal where we'll do business with you, the Taliban, say the Chinese, and in exchange you make sure that there are no insurgents crossing over our border into Xinjiang province?
Well, I think that really needs to have an answer for other questions, whether there will be like a a successful peace. Even, for example, if the Taliban is a dominant force, there will still be other communities, and the Taliban will need to have peace with those communities. If there isn't any peace, then the Taliban, of course, will be still will be one of the actors in Afghanistan. And any country dealing with Afghanistan will need to take into account other actors, other communities as well. And what we see so far is that, of course, the Taliban have pushed into the districts, and this has triggered an unexpectedly early escalation of the conflict into a sort of multi-level war with different communities getting mobilized and arming themselves. And of course, they are now involved in this fighting. And of course, the Taliban do appear to be confident that they will take the country by force, but there are resistance across the country, and if this resistance continues, and then it will only end up in the disruption of the political order. And of course, any country should be wise enough to deal, not to deal with, for example, a country that has no political order.
Let me bring in on this, Ambassador Humayun Azizi. So you heard the way Ali Yawar Adili spells it out. More and more groups arming themselves against the Taliban, outside of the security forces. Afghanistan's government is still in power in Kabul. Is the Afghan government looking for new friends abroad, perhaps, with the U.S. departure?
Yes, for sure. If we look at to the agreement between United States and Taliban, on that agreement, the U.S. government defined the future government of Afghanistan that should be Taliban. Because if you look at, there is a phrase, Taliban pledged that from the soil of Afghanistan, nor Taliban nor Al-Qaeda will not interfere to the place that there is interest of United States. So this is an indirect definition. I'm opposite of that China will fill the vacuum. I totally agree there is behind a deal between US and Taliban, because the agreement, the annexes, the unknown part is unclear. It's not public yet, even for European allies, even for Afghan government. So to implement the new scenario in that region, in Afghanistan, because all these problems refer to the Cold War period. The today's extremists born while the US supported these groups to fight against Soviet Union. So what we are facing today, we are victimized of the conflict of superpowers from the Cold War period up to now. Just now the scenario changed, and the war will continue. So for the war, they need to mobilize some other groups under the name of resistance. This is the big problem. And if we want a genuine peace, we should understand the root cause of current problem. The root cause of current problem refers to the United States, to the Soviet Union, to the Pakistan, to the Arabic countries.
To try to find
still they continue to interfere.
To try to find
and they are not accountable, not for their nations, not for international community, and not for Afghans.
Right, try to find a new basis on which to go forward. Before we go, Afghanistan's flag bearer, the Tokyo Olympics, will be 25-year-old sprinter Kimia Yusufi, and she is definitely worried about the future.
My concern is about the peace process, especially about what would happen to girls and their sports if they make peace with the Taliban. At the moment, my biggest worry is about how much freedom female athletes would be allowed to have in society.
Wasma Frog, we're out of time, but just your thoughts on what that will mean to you when you see that young sprinter carrying the Afghan flag at the Olympics.
Well, you know, in many districts, the women have already been banned from working. Today, AKDN female staff were asked not to come back to work in Faizabad, Badakhshan. But what I want to say here is that I'm looking at a civil war in Afghanistan. The Afghans do not want the Taliban. At least not all Afghans do not want the Taliban. So there are at least 24 very active combats that have been created by local communities as well as militias. And we have many other terrorist groups. You saw the June 8th UN Security Council report. We have thousands of foreign fighters, from the Uzbek militant units to the Chinese Uyghurs. So this country will actually be a good safe haven for the international terrorism. An influx of Afghan refugees are on the way. Like in Istanbul, I was traveling. I saw Afghans refugees like sleeping on the streets in Istanbul, looking for food in dustbin. As you know, so they think that they can actually use the waters from Istanbul, from Turkey, to come towards Europe. So things are quite grim actually at our end. And the world will also see it and feel it.
All right, we'll leave it there, unfortunately, for now. Much more to talk about. Wasma Frog, I want to thank you so much for joining us from Kabul. I want to thank Ali Yawar Adili as well. Ambassador Mohammed Homayoun Azizi, Leela Jacinto, thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.